My teacher said I'd fail. My speech went viral. Those words still echo in my head as sharp as the chalk screech she used to punish us when she wanted silence. I was 16, sitting in the third row of a classroom that always smelled faintly of dust and burnt coffee. Mrs. Dalton, our English teacher, had her favorites, and I was not one of them. She liked polished kids, those with neat handwriting, expensive shoes, and parents who donated to the PTA. I was none of those things. My sneakers had holes at the toes, my handwriting tilted like it was drunk, and my mom was too busy working double shifts to bake cookies for bake sales. When the announcement about the upcoming debate competition came, it wasn't just another event. For me, it was a chance to speak, to finally have people listen to me instead of laughing at me. I had words stored in me like fireworks, and I wanted them to explode. But when I told Mrs. Dalton I was signing up, she didn't just discourage me. She laughed. She put her glasses down on the desk, leaned forward, and said in front of the entire class, "Stay quiet, Jason. You'll only embarrass yourself. Some people are meant to shine, and some are meant to sit quietly and clap. You're the latter." I felt the heat rush to my face, the snickers from classmates stabbing my back like tiny knives, my fists clenched under the desk. That night, instead of crying myself to sleep like I had done so many times, I opened a blank notebook, and I began to write. The topic for the debate was, what defines courage? The irony hit me. Courage wasn't just some abstract word for me. Courage was my mom leaving a toxic marriage. Courage was me getting up every day despite being labeled the quiet loser. Courage was speaking even when your voice shook. So I wrote from that place, from my bones, from my bruises. Every night after finishing homework and washing dishes, I would sit by the small lamp in my room and write, scratch out lines, rewrite. I watched videos of famous speeches. I practiced in front of the cracked mirror, pretending the water stains were faces in the crowd. And little by little my words took shape. But the day before the contest, Mrs. Dalton cornered me as I packed my bag. She said in a cold, clipped tone, "Jason, it's not too late to step down. Spare yourself the humiliation. Spare us the second-hand embarrassment." I stared at her, heart thudding, but for the first time I didn't nod or look away. I said softly, "We'll see." The next day, the auditorium smelled of floor polish and nervous sweat. Rows of parents, teachers, and students filled the seats. Contestants lined up backstage, their polished shoes clicking on the floor. My sneakers squeaked awkwardly. My palms were damp, my knees weak. When my name was called, a hush fell. I stepped onto the stage, papers trembling in my hand. The lights blinded me, and for a moment, I almost believed her. Almost believed that I'd choke, that silence would swallow me whole. Then I looked at the front row. My mom was there, exhausted, eyes rimmed red from the night shift, but she was smiling. That smile was my anchor. I took a deep breath, set my papers aside, and began to speak. Not from notes, but from my heart. I talked about courage not as medals or loud victories, but as the quiet strength to keep going. Courage was standing in classrooms where you were told you were worthless, and daring to prove them wrong. Courage was a single mother holding the family together with tired hands. Courage was every unseen kid who had something to say but was told to stay silent. At first, my voice trembled. A cough from the back row nearly derailed me. But then something happened. The silence wasn't hostile anymore, it was listening. People leaned in. I saw heads nodding. I felt the words pour out, faster, stronger, as if they had been waiting years to be freed. And then, halfway through, I saw Mrs. Dalton. She was in the side aisle, arms crossed, lips tight, watching me, waiting for me to slip. That sight filled me with fire instead of fear. My voice grew louder. I raised my chin. "Courage," I said, "is not the absence of fear. It's the decision to speak when they expect you to stay quiet. It's the act of standing, even if you've been told your whole life to sit down." The crowd erupted at the end. Cheers, claps, whistles. My chest heaved as if I had just run a marathon, but my heart soared. I had done it. I looked to my mom, tears streaming down her cheeks. She mouthed, "That sips, my boy." But then, just as I stepped down, something happened that threatened to undo it all. Mrs. Dalton was speaking to one of the judges, her voice low but sharp. The judge's expression tightened, his pen pausing midair. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but her eyes flicked toward me, and I knew. She was trying to sabotage me, even after everything. And that sits where everything shifted. "What do you think?" Mrs. Dalton whispered to the judge. Would she actually succeed in sabotaging me after that moment of triumph? I'd love to see your thoughts in the comments. When I stepped off the stage, sweat still damp on my forehead, the applause echoing in my ears, I should have been flying. But instead, I felt a pit open in my stomach as I watched Mrs. Dalton lean in toward one of the judges, her lips moving quickly, her hand gesturing discreetly in my direction. I couldn't hear her words, but I didn't need to. The way the judge's brows furrowed, the way his pen stilled above the evaluation sheet, told me everything. She wasn't just going to sit quietly and let me have this victory. She wanted to snatch it from me, even now. I froze in the wings of the auditorium, my heart pounding louder than the cheers had been just seconds earlier. My mom had rushed toward me, her arms half open for a hug, but she stopped when she saw my eyes fixed on Mrs. Dalton. "What's wrong?" she whispered, but I didn't answer. How could I? I didn't even know the full extent of what she was saying. When the results were finally announced, I came in third place. Third. My speech had drawn the loudest applause of the evening, My message had moved people to tears. Yet somehow, I wasn't even in the top two. The audience's reaction was confused murmurs. A few gasps, even whispers of how, and that doesn't make sense. But Mrs. Dalton smiled, arms folded, like a cat that had just eaten the canary. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying her smirk over and over in my mind. The injustice burned hotter than any humiliation I'd ever felt. But I didn't know yet that my story wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. The following morning, I woke up to buzzing notifications on my phone. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Dozens of alerts, then hundreds. My friend Mia had filmed my entire speech and uploaded it to social media with the caption, "They told him he'd fail." Listen to this. Overnight, the video had exploded. Shares, likes, comments, it was everywhere. By the time I dragged myself into school, my face had been seen by thousands. By lunchtime, millions. Walking down the hall that day was surreal. Kids who never noticed me suddenly stopped to clap me on the back. Strangers told me my words had made them cry, and even teachers gave me nods of respect. But Mrs. Dalton, she looked at me like I was a stain she couldn't scrub out. By the end of the week, the video hit 10 million views. News outlets picked it up. Local reporters wanted interviews. My mom cried watching anchors describe me as the voice of courage, and Mrs. Dalton's attempt to silence me had backfired in the most public way possible. The real turning point came during a school board meeting 2 weeks later. Parents had started sending in complaints, not just about the results of the debate, but about Mrs. Dalton's behavior in general. Apparently, my video had struck a nerve. Other students came forward with stories of how she'd mocked their accents, dismissed their ideas, or favored kids whose parents had influence. The board requested a formal review, and I was asked to testify. Sitting in that boardroom was scarier than stepping onto the debate stage. The room was full of adults in suits, papers stacked high, faces serious. But when they played my video on the projector, the one that had gone viral, everything changed. The applause that had erupted in the auditorium now echoed in the boardroom. They paused the video, and the chairman looked directly at Mrs. Dalton. "And you told this young man he would embarrass himself?" he asked coldly. She tried to argue, her voice dripping with false confidence. She said the competition wasn't about applause. It was about structure and delivery. But then Mia, bless her, stood up. She had also recorded a clip of Mrs. Dalton's words to me in class, the day she told me to stay quiet and not embarrass myself. Hearing that played back in the sterile silence of the boardroom was devastating. You could see the blood drain from her face. By the end of the session, the board decided to place her under investigation. A month later, the news was official. She would not be returning to teach. Her resignation letter was tucked away quietly, but the students knew the truth. She had mocked me, tried to silence me, and in doing so, she had destroyed herself. As for me, the video continued to live a life of its own. I was invited to speak at a youth leadership conference, then at a local university, then at a national event about overcoming adversity. Every time I stepped up to the mic, I remembered the first time, my hands trembling, my heart racing, my teacher waiting for me to fail. And every time I proved her wrong, I felt myself grow stronger. My mom framed the newspaper article that called me the student who found his voice. It hangs in our living room, a reminder that sometimes the people who doubt you the most end up giving you the fire you need. And Mrs. Dalton? I saw her once, months later, at a grocery store. She looked smaller, somehow. No authority in her voice, no smirk on her lips. She avoided my eyes, but I didn't. I walked right past her, head high, carrying not shame but pride. Because the truth was simple. She said I'd fail. But failure had never been mine to carry. Have you ever had someone tell you that you'd fail, only to prove them wrong in the loudest way possible? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to read them.